The Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper. And now, Coach Bill Clark.
Welcome into the Bill Clark Show, episode number 11. Pat Smith, Landrum Roberts, Smiley Robinson, along with the coach, Bill Clark, joins us here on the Bill Clark Show. How about that? He shows up for his own show.
It's very nice of you, Coach,
Thank
to
you.
do that.
Appreciate that.
Week.
Thanks for taking time out, Coach. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
How you been? All right, let's start with Alabama. Alabama overcoming that tough loss at Tennessee. They shut out Mizzou. I know Mizzou had some injuries, but, Coach, anytime that you can go out and play 4 quarters and shut out the opponent, you got to feel good moving forward.
Yeah, shutouts are just, man, they're so hard to come by. There's so many ways somebody can score. They were down there. We had a goal line stand. They had a goal line stand. Things that were interesting to me, I think you heard them talk about discipline during the week, which you would think that's a foregone conclusion. But let's go back and tuck our shirts in. Let's do the little things. Yeah, that's all the things that wins, especially in those tight games. Defensively, a lot better. We had 3 takeaways. We're going to talk about the defense later in the show, so I'm not going to go too far in that. I thought they played a lot harder. Obviously, Missouri loses their quarterback. We know that was a huge deal. Just looking at what the difference was in Missouri the last week against Auburn. Defensively played well. Gave the offense some time probably to get caught up. I do think they made some changes. The ones we talked about, run the ball more with Milroe, and then maybe just 2 receiver reads. That's what it looked like to me, and that's what you want to do with this guy. It's 1-2, take off. So a lot better effort, the shutout, so just a complete game, and the 3 takeaways.
What I liked about Alabama is you had a 13-0 lead at the half. And the offense had sputtered at certain points, but in the second half, what do? You lean on your running game, and you had Justice Haynes and Jam Miller imposing their will, offensive line imposing their will, and you really saw a demoralized Missouri team in that second half.
Yeah, and that's what it looks like. It's complementary football is both run and pass. And what do you need when you need it? You got to have them both, but you got to be able to run the ball, and then you got a quarterback that can run too. But it's got to be those running backs, not just him, running the ball all the time.
All right, let's talk about the momentum for Alabama in regards to they got the bye week. They get ready for LSU. We'll preview that next week on the show. But just your thoughts from a momentum standpoint and the morale of that football team, getting a big win at home, now going and playing for your college football playoff life.
Yeah, I think it's everything you want. You got to turn it around. You got to look more like yourself. You had the shutout win. You ran the ball. You talked about having discipline, and there it is, and you play better. So that's the things as a coach you want to say, look, if you'll do these things, we're going to be better. So there we are leading into a giant game with an open date late in the season.
You mentioned the open date, and this is relatively new with the 2 open dates that college football teams are getting. With them spaced so close together, how would you utilize that, Coach?
Yeah, I think for me it's every ounce of time used for the, and the question for me is always, am I getting ready for this next game, or is there, and we talked about that earlier in the shows way back, is that the next opponent, or am I trying to get 2-3 games? They know who they're getting ready for. So you can get every bit of your time, every bit of your effort is toward LSU, and that's the way you want it.
All right, let's go to Lexington, Kentucky, because the Auburn Tigers found themselves getting right, and the running game, Landrum was just talking about how Alabama was impressive, but that night, Jarquez Hunter, we've been talking about it all season long, Coach. Your thoughts on him and what he can do for this Auburn offense moving forward?
Yeah, he's a difference maker. We've been saying that really all throughout the year. Let's cut back on some RPOs and let's make sure and feed this guy. And you saw that happen. Now, you got to do these other things. RPOs are fine, and you got to throw the ball down the field, and you got to spread it horizontally. But when you got arguably the best back in the league, you've got to give him the ball, and you got to give him enough carries. And some people that really are great in the running game, and I believe this, but from hearing guys that understand this and have had the greatest running backs probably in the history of college football talk about what does 10 carries do, what does 15 carries do, what does 20 carries do. These running backs get better as the defense tired. They get better. They get lathered up. What do you have, 22, 23 carries the other night, and that made a big difference.
Yeah, 23 for 278. I think a big thing too, Coach, and you can certainly speak to this, but for Auburn, self-inflicted mistakes in Lexington, but being able to overcome those mistakes where in games past that we've seen this season, it's cost them football games to get a win over an SEC opponent on the road, no matter what Kentucky's record is. I think that could really help this team as far as self-confidence moving forward.
Yeah, it was a must-win, really. Let's just say it. It was a must-win. I think their defense is playing well. I really do. I think their defense is playing well. It's giving their offense some chance to make mistakes. This is the third game in a row, or not in a row, but third game I've seen them make this big mistake right before halftime, which is – I don't question coaches. Obviously, Coach, I think he does a great job, but you got to quit calling a timeout with 18 seconds to leave yourself no time go up there and spike the ball. So that they've got to get better at some of those things, because that's what's going to win these games. It's going to come down to the end. But other than that, I thought they did a great job. Their defense is playing well, and they ran the football.
All right, so I want to ask you about their opponent this weekend. They're playing a very familiar foe in regards to the quarterback, Diego Pavia. He came to Jordan Hare last year, got a surprising win against the Tigers. From a tendency standpoint, when they go back and you have, whether it was earlier in the season, a GA or an analyst that's already breaking down tape for Vandy and for Diego Pavia, what do you look for from a tendency standpoint? Do you actually go back and look at what exactly he did last year and had success, and you defend it that way? Just take us through that process.
Yeah, I think the only thing you go to last year is if you had the same defensive coordinator with Jerry Kill being on the staff, same offensive coordinator. That's what you would look for. What did they do to us? Well, it's a different defensive coordinator at Auburn. You're always trying to get as much film and as much tape on those guys. So last year really doesn't play as much in it because we're doing, and I say we again, they're doing different things on defense. I think the thing you're looking at is what did they do against Alabama? Who has stopped them? I mean, look what they did last week against Texas. They were right there in that game throughout the whole game. The thing about about this quarterback, you're going to have to beat him. You're going to have to win the game. You're going to have to play fourth quarters. He is not going to give up. He's not going to quit. And when that guy doesn't do it, the people around him are the same way, and they're a lot better defensively, so it's going to be a tough match.
For DJ Durkin, Auburn's defensive coordinator, is there anything specific about this Vanderbilt offense or Diego Pavia specifically, Coach, that you say, okay, well, teams have had success doing this when you put him in this type of situation? Do you see that with him?
I think the thing that they do a good job of, besides run the ball, they're very good with those third down throws when they need them. That tight end is really made some unbelievable catches last week in that Texas game. So I think taking that pass game away and make them become one-dimensional, and that sounds crazy because you're not going to take all their run game away. What you can't do is let them get like what happened with Alabama where they keep nickel and diming you down the field. You've got to take that passing game away and make them one-dimensional.
Also want to mention UAB coming up. It's a very special game, and later in the program we'll spend a little bit more talking about the Children's Harbor game. But, Coach, UAB had a bye week. Tulsa's coming in. Tulsa came from behind to win last week. Tell us about what UAB needs to do to try to get this thing righted.
Well, I think they've got every opportunity. Tulsa, I got to give them credit. I got to see that game. I mean, they had every opportunity. They were way down and didn't quit. So, that put some wind in their sails, which I'm sure UAB would rather see them coming off a loss. But UAB's had an open date. They've had an extra time to prepare. They should have every opportunity. They're good enough to beat this team on a very special game that they should be playing for these kids from Children's Harbor.
And coming off the bye week, but the last time we saw UAB, Raymond James Stadium against South Florida, a lot of things that you can take away as positives in that game. It's just, I think, more about UAB not having that lull, and a lot of those lulls have happened late in games, whether it be middle of the third quarter, start of the fourth quarter, trying to avoid that. Hopefully they can do that, and I think this will be a great opportunity for them to get another win.
Yeah, I mean, they've had some times where they really started fast, but you're at home, you're playing for something special, you're in desperate need of a win. This is the time to do it.
Smart Bank Smart Call of the Week. Let's go down to College Station, Texas, Coach, where Texas A&M down 17-7 in the second half. And you being a former head coach, I know that you've probably had to make some of those tough personnel decisions. But right in the middle of the biggest game of the year for Texas A&M, Coach Mike Elko makes the call of the year.
Yeah, and that's not easy. I mean, you've brought in this other quarterback who's now he's leading you. You're winning games, and you got two different styles. You've got the thrower who is an athlete, and then you got this runner. And so to make this change was a huge deal. Now, we talked about it on Monday. LSU spent all this time on this guy that's going to throw the ball. Hey, what if he goes down? We got to maybe get ready for the zone read, but you just don't have the practice time to spend on this guy. Then you got Klein, the coordinator, who really understands how to run the quarterback. What a great move by the head coach to have your backup ready and then have a scheme. Power read, zone read, quarterback run. You could tell where LSU had spent their time, and they could not stop it.
With Garrett Nussmeier, uncharacteristic with the 3 interceptions, was it something in particular that Mike Elko was doing defensively, or was it a case of Garrett Nussmeier maybe pressing a little bit too much?
If you've never played in that stadium, of course they've got the advantage when they go play in their stadium of the noise. I'm telling you, that thing was electric. Loud. You cannot hear. If we're sitting here next to each other, you can't hear yourself talk. There's no way that doesn't affect you a little bit. Texas A&M, we knew they had great people. Now you've got a coach who's got great people. He knows about defense. When it's the head coach, there's just something about it. That's kind of near and dear to my heart. When the head coach is so involved in the defense, they're going to play harder. They're going to get better. We already knew they had great people, so I got to give Texas A&M the credit on that.
Smart Bank, very close to you, Coach, and I know the board of directors and everybody very close to you.
Yeah, I get to be on the board of directors with those guys. The thing that I love about them is small town feel. You're going to walk in, they're going to know who you are. They get to you quickly, but you got all the aspects of a big bank. So the guys at Smart Bank really do a good job. Check them out.
Webb Concrete and Building Materials, building blocks to victory. Let's go to the Big Ten for a minute, Coach. Let's talk about Ohio State and Penn State. This is a huge game. Penn State's James Franklin, not very good against top 5 opponents. He's 1-8 lifetime, 1-9 all-time versus Ohio State. Tell us about what you think about this one going to Happy Valley.
Well, this is going to be a huge one. Obviously undefeated. They brought in the new offensive coordinator. A lot of us got to see him against Southern Cal with the comeback in that game. Really didn't give them a lot of chance. They stayed in the game. They got the great tight end. Quarterback is banged up this week, so that's going to be a question mark. I think the backup is adequate, not just a runner, but he can throw the ball. But this is going to be a big test for the head coach. I know it's going to be very important. You got the home field advantage. We know how good Ohio State is. Obviously, they're leading the conference in scoring defense. Got the great receivers. Howard, the quarterback, has done a good job. It was a great game with them in Oregon, so this should be a great contest.
When you look at Ohio State, though, you do question a little bit offensively. We saw what Nebraska was able to do a week after getting blown out in Bloomington, Indiana. You wonder, Penn State, that being the strength, their defense, if they can dial it up and finally get James Franklin one of those signature wins.
Yeah, I think this is their opportunity. I think Ohio State obviously has got tons of talent. I just talked about their defense, their quarterback. I heard him talk about the fact he didn't get recruited by Penn State, and he's from there. So this is going to be a big deal to him. But both sides going to be a huge game. I've been impressed with Penn State's defense, changes they made on offense. I would pick Penn State in this one.
So I want to get your perspective as a coach, and I'm not asking you to name names, but the numbers for James Franklin against the Ohio State University, that gets a lot of people fired.
Yeah.
Was there any team, anybody in particular, that for whatever reason, whether it was back in your high school days, coaching at Prattville, you didn't lose a lot of games, so it's probably not there. But my point being, is there somebody that you always felt like, my goodness, I can't get over the hump with this guy? Whatever it was, the schemes or the personalities, but it just seems like James Franklin has got a lot of issues with certain coaches, not personally, but just not a very good record against a lot of them.
Yeah, I always felt like maybe there was somebody out there that we needed to get, and then we found a way to get them. I think that's the question here for James Franklin. Now's your chance. You were kind of probably a little bit conservative on offense, whatever word we want to use offensively, and now they went and made a good change at coordinator. They've got every opportunity. So this, if you can't get it done this time, that's when problems start arising. When you've got every reason to win, you got to find a way to win these games. That's what you're getting the big bucks for.
How much of that is a real thing with coaches? They probably don't let on to it with their team, but certain matchups against certain guys and getting in their head.
I was just thinking about something for me. I remember we got to Prattville, and there was 18 guys show up at the first meeting. This was June. I wasn't very smart taking this job, but I knew what it could be. Robert E. Lee was that team. And you think back, if you're from the state of Alabama, Robert E. Lee was this team, and we somehow, by the grace of God, had won 6 games the first year. I go to everywhere and we ended up with about 60 players. We're 6 until we go to Lee, and just something changed in those guys. And we get beat pretty good. End up having to go back the next year. Roman Harper's senior year, we go Remember the Titans the day before. We found a way to win that game. They'd only won one time against the school in the history of the school. So there's some mental blocks, maybe not even as a coach, for your team, for even your school. And I'd say, hey, this is a team we're not supposed to beat, or we have a hard time beating. That's the things you got to find a way to flip. To me, though, that was always the fun. If we got to break it down on Buckeyes or Generals or whatever that is you're around with, they get so sick of hearing this team. All I got to do is unleash these guys when the gates come open. But there are those teams that cause that for various reasons.
All right, the Alabama Power 5 of the week. But before we do that, got to talk about Webb Building Materials, because I know your son is now working there.
Yep. So you need something flooring from the Pell City branch. See Jacob Clark. So, but we got the Oxford showroom. We've got Oxford Ready Mix. We've got Heflin, Roanoke. So Birmingham, Homewood. They're all over. And of course, Webb can help you with all your needs. Flooring, building materials, and of course, concrete. So go check those guys out.
So Landrum, I got a feeling that the Alabama Power 5 of the week this week is probably going to be about the same.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there, Pat.
Yeah, who knows? I'm going with Oregon 1, Georgia 2, Penn State 3, Miami 4, Ohio State 5. I think Ohio State, no offense, Molly, to Nebraska, but I think they they were really lucky to win last week. I think we'd probably all agree. So we dropped those two. Texas 6. I've got Texas A&M 7. I've got Tennessee 8. Clemson 9, Notre Dame 10, Iowa State 11, BYU 12. Of course, Indiana and Alabama's 13 and 14.
BYU at 12.
Yes, we got BYU. They're undefeated.
He's just propping them up because
the last time they lost was in
a bowl
the
game.
Independence Bowl.
Right.
Radiant
That's
Technologies.
Yeah. Shocker.
That's why.
You beat them.
That is the Alabama Power 5 of the week, Coach, and Alabama Power, a fine sponsor of this program.
Yeah, and I think we talk a lot about Alabama Power giving back. One of their big things they talk about is protecting the community, manage the environment. They want to impact. They're giving back. They're very philanthropic, very involved in a lot of causes. And always when we were involved in a cause, it seemed like Alabama Power was always right there beside us.
Donahue Chevrolet's Drive for Success. Let's talk a little Heisman here. Guy up in the Pacific Northwest, Boise, Idaho, Ashton Genty. For those that have not seen him yet, he is worth the stay up late at night, Coach.
My gosh. Let's talk about this guy. He's 5'9", he's 215, 220. He's had 159 carries, 1376, 18 touchdowns, averaging 8.7 yards a carry. He had 128 yards versus UNLV, and people are saying, well, he didn't have as good a game. UNLV is a good team with a head coach who's a heck of a defensive coordinator. That was a war. This guy, he's impressive. He definitely can be have a chance to win the Heisman.
What about quarterback from Army? He's still got to be in the conversation.
He's definitely in the conversation, 100%. It's like I always said, if I was recruiting a kid on a smaller school, maybe a 1A or 2A, people say, well, how do you decide if this guy's that good? When they are dominant. When they're dominant beyond a shadow of a doubt. And that's what he's done at Army. He's got that whole team on his back. Everybody knows it. The ball's in his hands every time, and he is dominant every single time out. So I think you got to include him. Obviously, we've got Gabriel from Oregon. We've got Hunter from Colorado. We got Ward from Miami. But I think he's definitely in that picture as well.
Do you anticipate, let's just say that Jalen Milroe goes to Baton Rouge and he plays the type of game he did against Georgia? Is he all of a sudden back on the radar screen? Because right now the SEC, if you look at the Vegas odds, Carson Beck has the 7th best odds. The SEC is nowhere to be found in this Heisman conversation.
I think he could. I think LSU primetime or whenever I'm sure that's a primetime game. There's a difference when you go out in those games and play really, really well. If he just came out and was dynamite like the Georgia game, I think he could get back in the conversation.
Donahue Chevrolet, that Tahoe that you come in here on two wheels every single time we record this program.
Well, we got our October specials are still going. We got 8,000 off Tahoes. We got 8,000 off our 2,500 Silverados, 10,000 off the Silverado, the 1,500 Silverados. Go to DonahueChevrolet.com. Those guys are great, and they'll definitely take care of you. All right, we've got a very special guest join us today. Kat, tell us a little bit about what you do and about our game coming up this Saturday.
Yeah, so my name's Kat Outson. I'm the CEO of Children's Harbor, and we've been around for 35 years. This is our 35th anniversary. Wow. And I know you know what we do, but if others don't, our mission is to strengthen the families of seriously ill children through refuge, respite, and resources. And this year alone, just at the hospital, we've seen nearly 33,000 children and family members.
Wow. Well, we got a big game coming up this Saturday. We got UAB against Tulsa. This is a Champions for Our Children's game. We started this back in 2017. I think this is our 8th year now. I was sitting around in my office. John Neal, I got to tell the story right quick. John Neal and I were sitting around in the office, had a relationship with Children's Harbor. We'd been players coming over, getting involved. Tim Alexander, who worked for me, would bring kids over. And so we wanted to do something to recognize them as we were bringing the team back that first year, and we said we need an alternate uniform. How can we recognize them? I said maybe we put Children's Harbor on the back. Coach Neal said, what if we put the patients' names on the back? And just obviously we had this huge win. If you want to go back and Google this thing, go back and look at us playing La Tech with the block. But our kids getting to know the former patients now, 100-something players wearing these uniforms, giving the jerseys to the families, them coming to the game. So just a great partnership. I think it's one of the best traditions in college football. Coach Vincent kept that when I left, and then Coach Dilfer's doing it now. So really excited about the game.
Yeah, it is so amazing. And what's wonderful is all these kids, there's going to be at least 70 kids just at the practice.
Yeah.
So we're looking at 300 children and family members that'll be at the game. 103 kids are going to be recognized. But the look on their faces, I mean, we were at practice, or not practice, we just did a tour on Monday, and this little bitty kid is looking up, the look on his face when he saw these huge linebackers,
Yeah.
he was just like, oh my God. They just think it's the coolest thing.
Yep.
And then to know they're watching them, they've got their names on their jerseys. And one of the little girls was like, it's just so cool that it's not just me thinking about myself and what I'm going through. There's somebody else out there that's thinking of me too. And it just means so much to them.
Yeah, I've had so many families grab me through the years and say, Coach, we were at that game. It meant so much to get to either bring a family member back, or even those we've lost, where they get to talk about their family member they lost. And it's really been special. And I always said, really, for us, it was so much better, even for our players, than it was maybe even for those patients. They learned so much. They grew so much. So love that partnership. Proud of it. My family, Bill Clark Family Foundation, is still part of that. And then, of course, we've got the Poarch Creek Indians are part of giving, Radiance Technology. So we got a lot of other sponsors. I know there's tons of people who sponsor Children's Harbor as well.
Absolutely. Brassfield and Gorey has just done an amazing job. They're actually helping cover the ticket so everybody can come to the game. We've got sponsors making sure that everybody's got cards, credit cards, so they can spend money on food. We've kind of tried to think of everything
Right.
to make sure they have that fun experience, because it might be one of the only ones they get all year.
Well, anything that, as far as giving to Children's Harbor, they can do that. They can go to my Family Foundation website and give. We're going to be giving the jerseys to these families,
Yeah.
and of course, there's this is what a great organization fighting. Just giving these families from childhood illness a place to go, whether it's Lake Martin or at the hospital, Children's Harbor. So appreciate you coming today.
Thank you.
Coach, such a great interview in regards to what's coming up this Saturday. It's dear to a lot of us, whether Children's Hospital, Children's Harbor, UAB football. It's just a very special day at Protective.
Yeah, it's such a win for these kids, these former patients, Children's Harbor, players at UAB. I say our players. Once again, I'm appreciative we've kept this tradition going. I think it's one of the best traditions in college football. It's a win all the way around, and hope people come out and support not just UAB football, but these kids and these patients.
And we think about making the day of a young person who's been going through a lot, but it's not only that, it's what it means to their families.
Yep.
And then what I've seen on the flip side is the impact that it has on players and coaches.
Yes.
And being a part of that makes this so significant and puts everything in perspective. And if for 60 minutes of a football game or 3.5 hours on a Saturday to see those children and their families who have been through so much, Coach,
Yeah.
get some enjoyment and have something else that they can focus on, it's really awesome.
Yeah, it's well said, Leonard. And I think the other thing, too, I always worry, we played La Tech in 17, had never beat La Tech in the history of the school, and we had the big win with the block. North Texas the next year, big win. So these kids are playing really, I would say, above themselves to play for these families and these patients. So really, truly a special deal.
So it should be a good time there at Protective Stadium coming up this weekend. Radiance Technology Defense of the Week. Let's go back to Tuscaloosa, Coach. I know that Mizzou was beat up,
Yeah.
backup quarterback, but you have to be impressed with what Alabama's defense not only did against Mizzou, first shutout by Mizzou team since 2019. Yeah. It's only the 8th shutout under Alabama since 2010.
Yeah.
And then there's some really good defenses that Nick Saban had at Alabama. But just talk about what this defense has done turnover-wise over the last 3 games to really turn the corner.
Well, I always like talking shutout. And I would talk to guys, especially when I was a high school coach, because we always talked about shutout. And I'd talk to the college guys, even way back, and they were like, well, we don't talk about shutouts because it's so hard to attain. I get that. Maybe if you think your job's on the line as a defensive coordinator, but how are you going to ever get – it's just like championships. You got to talk about it to get a shutout. So to get a shutout in college football today, what a big deal. goal line stands, which are always so cool to watch. They had that later in the game. So takeaways, I know that was one of the things we want to talk about today. Creating takeaways, sometimes that's hard to do, but to me it's so much about effort. It's so much about pursuit and extra effort to create takeaways, pressure on the quarterback that creates a bad throw as an interception. So getting those 3 takeaways, and they're kind of starting to do that. You're seeing Alabama do that. Big thing to me, and I spoke about it earlier in the show, they made a big deal this week about effort. We're going to tuck the shirts in. We're going to be more accountable. Yeah, that's what it's supposed to look like. And when we need those things to happen, especially to play great defense, effort, attitude, everybody being together, all those things that they're talking about, they made a big deal out of this week. I think we saw it out of their defense.
Anything that you saw from Kane Womack in that side of the ball schematically that maybe differed from previous games?
I really didn't, and I'd have to go back and watch every play. I thought it was more the things I'm talking about. I think it's like I say, we can draw up all these X's and O's, but if you don't have the effort with it, and I'm not necessarily questioning the effort made before, but those things when it gets a little bit tough and you need somebody to make a play, but you got to get off blocks, you got to tackle. They held those 2 really good receivers. I think they had 5 catches for 22 yards. So that was a big deal.
For those that, and we get this question a lot, and I want to ask you because you're the technical guy. Just in layman's terms, the definition of a swarm defense, what Womack is trying to do in Tuscaloosa, and how that might differ from what maybe Alabama teams have run previously.
I think swarm is something we used to break it down on when we first started talking about everybody getting to the ball. So, I think that was probably just the nickname he gave his defense. I think it's been overwrought. I think the 4 down is the real question. And the thing, and I see him being multiple, but multiplicity, just like you're seeing out of offense, my gosh, what do you not see today? Not just from one offense, they're all so varying where they got tackle over and all the RPOs and all the different formations, personnel, shifts, motions. Well, that's what you got to have defensively. I think that's probably where Pete maybe got himself in just a little bit from a PR standpoint of maybe 4-2-5. Well, multiple is really what you're looking for, and that's where they've been in the past. I think the thing that I saw, once again, effort, tackling, getting off blocks, being physical, is the things that overcomes any 4-2-5 or swarm or whatever they want to call themselves.
The secondary for Alabama, it was a question mark with some of the new faces we saw to start the season. I know we're going to preview the game next week, but LSU, Garrett Nussmeier, we've seen what he can do through the air, especially there at Tiger Stadium. They're always going to have talented wide receivers, but how important was it for Alabama, no matter the opponent, if it was Drew Pine or if it was Brady Cook, who they were throwing to, just to have that confidence and another notch in the belt heading to play in a hostile environment?
I think it was huge. I think big thing, too, is it helps their preparation. As we were talking about going into that open day, anything that lets you work harder, prepare better, have some confidence, not cockiness, but confidence, is going to make you a better team.
Radiance Technologies out of Huntsville and around the world. It's a great company.
Yeah, obviously, big sponsor of the Independence Bowl. They're also a sponsor of our Children's Harbor game. I don't know how we threw that Independence Bowl in there, guys. It just happened.
Last time
again.
BYU lost.
Yeah. The big thing for Radiance Technologies too is the things they do just for our defense contractors and making those lasers that shoot those drones down, which is protecting our country. So appreciate Radiance Technologies.
Also, Dr. Pepper and Buffalo Rock. They are the presenting sponsor of this. Jimmy Lee means so much, not only to sponsoring this program, but everything that he does in intercollegiate athletics, and also the benevolent nature of Jimmy Lee, because he does so much for charities around Birmingham and across the state of Alabama.
Yeah, he's truly one of the good guys. He's involved with all the schools. He's involved with Children's Hospital, Children's Harbor. Those guys do a great job. Obviously, Dr. Pepper college football. So proud for those guys to be our title sponsor.
It should be another wild weekend. And just think, next week, when we get together, we're going to be talking about the first college football playoff rankings. Cannot wait to compare the committee and Bill Clark's and see who got it right.
No pressure.
I'm putting my money on Coach Clark.
I am too. There's no doubt about it. For all of us here at the Bill Clark Show, have a great weekend, everyone. Check us out on YouTube and, of course, here on Jocks 94.5.
This has been The Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper.